7 o'clock on a Sunday night. What's in a name? It's Topical starts right now. A very good evening to South African, those watching around the world. My name is Blaine Herman, and this is It's Topical. Our digital audience with us tonight, it's so good to have them on the program. Really looking forward to getting their questions for our guests in a short while. Street names, some see it as an ordinary point of reference, others as a powerful way of communicating a town's political history. Winnie Mandela Drive, no more. That busy stretch of road in Johannesburg is now Winnie Mandela Drive. This process, as you know, has kicked up a debate on whether the renaming of streets around the country is a good idea. Well, generally, right, part of the consideration would be leaving a legacy of an integrated, united city, which is non-racial, non-sexist. It's about reflecting the history and culture of a province. But there are those who see it as, well, a waste of money, having little to no impact. Let's have that debate tonight, which leads us to our question of the week. And we're asking you, does renaming streets and landmarks to honor historical figures foster nation building, or does it foment division? We will have that discussion. How important is it to reflect the existing political order, especially its underpinning values and ideology? Let us know at It's Topical SABC. Perspective coming up. All right, let's get you some context. I'm going to bring in a few slides now to get you the state of play, where we were and why it matters now. We'll put up, some people don't know who William Nicol is, right? It's a famous road, and this is what we have learned so far. William Nicol, theologian, educator, governor, strong opponent to Bantu education, and advocating mother tongue education. And between this period, 1924 and 1925, he was a chairperson of the Afrikaner Broederbond. And between the period of 1948 and 58, governor of Transvaal, and named Johannesburg Road after himself. And the source is from the South African, Winnie Mandela. Let's put her slide up and tell you more about her. Known as the mother of the nation, right? Freedom fighter. In 58, detained for anti-past campaigns. She married Nelson Mandela in 58-77. She was banished to Bramford in the Free State, and in 93 was elected president of the ANC Women's League. And she was also a member of parliament, and the Order of Luthuli she received in silver back in 2016. Let me break this down further. My guest tonight, Palesa Kadi, chairperson of the South African Geographical Names Council. Palesa is joining us now live. Palesa, good to have you on the program. The South African Geographical Names Council, the mandate, and I was reading from a statement issued by the Department of Arts and Culture. It is to lead the transformation of South Africa's naming landscapes. Obviously, South Africans have a right to kind of participate and determine which names should be on their street poles in the communities that they live in. To what extent are the public consulted? To what extent are they part of a process like this?
Good evening to the listeners, and thank you for having the South African Geographical Names Council. Every South African, especially where it is pertaining to their immediate area or geographic area, is invited to be part of consultation, to approve, to object, to recommend, to even add on names that they believe are suitable for their specific areas. So it's everyone's business. The council comes right at the end.
Right. So what sort of period is given to a community when these decisions are taken?
Once we receive the names, which would have been looked at then by the South African Geographical Names Council,
Right.
Presented to the council and myself as the chairperson, then we take a resolution then to recommend to minister the names, having looked at the very same issue of consultation, wanting to know who was there and what are the origins of the name, and whether there is any approval from family where it pertains to a name of an individual living or passed on. So after that, then minister passes on and gazettes the name, giving the public 21 days to object, should there be an objection. Beyond that, then it is deemed approved.
Right. I want to understand better the motivation for a name change, especially the criteria, and especially what is looked at in terms of the benefits for a community in the long term outweighs kind of short-term effects or private interests. How can that best be shown? What sort of criteria? How is the criteria looked at?
The criteria is whether, if you choose a person, living or passed on, whether there's a family approval, but beyond that, what impact have they made into society?
Right.
So it continues to that. And it does not only include names of people, there are names of rivers and place names, right, and also mountains.
Yeah. Fauna, flora, is that more, well, is that pushed more than for people to go with, you know, historical figures, etc.?
We've seen that in the new developments, which are partly private. You'll find that they name more on flora, for instance.
Yeah.
I'm sure they just have their own reasons. But also we see a lot of international names. How many of us live in areas where it will be a so-and-so villa, which is here in South Africa?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's based on design, sometimes it's not. But you will not find any place called, Kral, for instance, but there will be a villa. Right. In Africa, in South Africa in particular.
I was going through a statement from the National Department of Sport, Arts and Culture issued last year, saying that 122 geographical names have been standardized throughout the country for the past 3 years. And these names are Abeja, changed from Port Elizabeth, King Paulo Airport changed from East London Airport, Winnie Mandela changed from Brandfort, a Free State town. In terms of the cost factor, on average, what does this cost?
One would not want to attribute a cost because there's already a line item for changes. Let's say for Sandrel, for instance, a board falls, the same as with a robot that is bumped by a particular individual. There's a budget set for that. So it is not costing lump sums or changes in budget in any way because there's a line item that exists for a medium-term expenditure. So it exists. And I think that debate is really a miscalculation, and it's very unfortunate that we are able to put value and cost into more than 100 years of oppression and many other forms of repression that many South Africans went through. So the impact, if we were to ask what does a street name cost, it will take one to change in their own systems. There's Surveyor General that we work with in terms of maps. In your South African Weather Service, for instance, what does it cost to change Port Elizabeth to Gqeberha? It's a mere change of name through a computerized or institutionalized system. Then you have your Sandral, then you also have PenSouth and other mechanisms of that. Google Map comes and they come through and they integrate the information.
Right.
So this is quite an integrated and a very well coordinated effort.
It's an important point to make because a lot of people are concerned regarding service delivery issues, etc. And if that money can be used in another area in order to affect change. But I get your point, and my guest, one of my guests, MMC Kenny Kunene, was quoted as saying you can't put monetary value to the pain of South Africans. We will ask him for more context with regards to that. But Palesa Kadi, thank you very much indeed for your time. Context always important. Stay with us. I understand that you are available to stay with us. We're going to come back and throw a few more questions to you, Palesa Kadi. Thank you so much. Palesa Kadi is from the South African Geographical Names Council. All right, I want to get your views now. And to our Word on the Street feature, we took to various areas of Johannesburg, seeking diverse insights and perspectives on this topic. And this is what you had to say. Take a look.
Most people that I know can't really pronounce these more traditional names. We know them well, William Nicol, Spencer Avenue, all these things. It's very easy to say, very easy to pronounce, very easy to tell, oh, I'm down there, I'm down here. Changing the name, are you going to get confused now?
I think it is a good thing to change the street name because now, as a country, we are heading towards economic transformation. So therefore, whenever now there are street names that have been named using the name of the icons who played a crucial role towards political transformation in our country, it reminds us as the inhabitants of this country that where we come from and who are those people who played a crucial role.
My take is that people are going to become very confused with all the renaming and changing of names and all of that. Because look at PE, people know it as PE, but we have to now call it Kwabera. So I just think it's going to be very confusing for a lot of people and yeah, complete waste of funding as well. So it's just all the ceremonies and everything.
I feel like they're showing respect and appreciation to our previous people who worked really hard for us to be where we are today as South Africans.
We need to be reminded of our history, and by having a street name, you are on a daily basis reminded of your history. About the division, to me it doesn't matter. But as I said in the beginning, I think that money could be utilized because there's lots of need in this country where the money can go to.
The people who fought for the struggle, they need to be recognized. Those are the great people of South Africa who fought for this freedom that we have today. So I don't think it's a waste of funds, and also we are moving with times. So these streets have been there for a very long time. So we need change.
I think that it's a great way of honoring legends, especially ones who had a huge influence on the country we live in today. I do think that there was an excessive amount of money spent on it that could have possibly been earmarked for something a little bit more important, but I do think it's a great way of remembering all of those struggle stalwarts.
I feel like it's a good thing, changing names, especially if the historic figures are people who fought for our rights, who fought for the change of this country and post-apartheid era.
All right, diverse views, right? You heard from my guest earlier on, Palesa, saying that these issues are budgeted for. Some say that you can't really put a price on healing the past, the atrocities of the past. The debate rages on. What are the factors at play here? Nation building, reconciliation, important. At the cost of what, though? Why are some people opposed to this? Is it got to do with prioritizing funds that are needed for other issues? Let's discuss. It's so much to discuss, so little time, but we'll get to it as well. My guest today, Councillor Kenny Kunene, thank you so much for your time. Member of the Mayoral Committee in Johannesburg Roads and Transport. We also have Heindrich Wyngaard, Chairperson of the Cape Forum. Ernst Roets is the head of policy at Solidarity. He's going to join us now, as well as Palesa Kadi, Chairperson, SA Geographical Names. We also have our digital audience with us tonight. It's good to have them. We're going to throw in a few questions to them in a short while. Councillor, to you first. substitution of names with political heroes or cultural icons as a way of healing the past, reconciliation. Pushback would be, some say, it's a waste of money. Fix the potholes, for instance, with that same money. Why is it necessary to change names?
Obviously, when we do budgets, when government do budgets, there is money allocated for roads. The problems with the road infrastructure is bigger than potholes. Every time I drive on Heindrich, I remember apartheid. Every time I drive on Jan Smart's, Louis Botha, I remember the scars that I have as a young person, being arrested, put in prison with adults in a Kroonstad prison when I was 15 years old. And I think we are the only country in the world that honors and celebrate our killers, our oppressors, the people who implemented a system that was declared to be a crime against humanity. So we cannot talk about reconciliation if we do not deal with the wounds that the majority of this country have experienced.
So the question is, it is obviously important not to forget the past because it talks to where we are now. And some would say, for example, William Nicol is part of somebody's past and somebody's heritage. Why not inculcate that together with other names?
William Nicol was the chairperson of the Broederbond that was instrumental in the establishment of apartheid. He must be gone. And I'm happy that we have implemented this and we have removed him. In fact, we must also remove Bryanston. We must change the name of Bryanston itself because the chairman of Bryanston municipality at the time was Sandton municipality is a man who comes from London who actually named the area Bryanston after a place in England that is named Bryanston. We are not in England. We do not have London here to have a town named East London. We do not have a town here that belongs to the Queen of England to be named Queenstown. We can't have a town that is named King William's Town. King William does not own a town here. So we need to make sure that the names of our streets and towns and national key points, like the Kruger National Park, you can't have such a big, very important park named after Paul Kruger. It's wrong. So the names of our streets and our towns and our national key points must be evident of where we are. We are in Africa. We are in the southern part of Africa. Ngugi wa Thiong'o, the professor from Kenya, when he delivered a speech in East London, he actually said, South Africans need to change the name of East London to S.E.K. Mkhai. S.E.K. Mkhai was a teacher, a poet, a literature guru who translated a lot of material into Xhosa, but who also wrote about 8 stanzas of Nkosi Sikelel' Africa. These people are not being celebrated. When you give a name of a street or a town to a person, you are honoring that person. How do we honor Hendrik Verwoerd, Paul Kruger, Foster, Jan van Riebeeck, Vasco da Gama in a democracy? Hitler named many things after himself and his fellow Nazis. Those names don't exist in Germany today.
Right.
They've been removed.
Let me bring in Heindrich Wyngaard, chairperson of the Cape Forum. Heindrich, good to have you on the program. What do you say with regards to certain criticism about the renaming of street names, that it's retributive, that it's divisive, that it's erasing history?
Blaine, good evening also to the fellow participants and to the viewers. So Cape Forum, first of all, says change is important. But you don't change just for the sake of changing. So your question that your producer sent to us was whether name changes contribute to unity or division. I think the answer is possibly between the two. Sometimes it causes division, other times it causes unity. And I think the correct approach, if we're going to stay true to the 1994 agreement, one that says nation building, one that says we won't forget the past, but we will, while remembering the past, still try to unify our nation. That's why the preamble to our constitution talks about our diverse cultures. That's why the motto of our coat of arms refer to us as diverse groups, cultural groups or racial groups, if you subscribe to racial identities.
Right.
Those ones, the diversity should always be celebrated. Unfortunately, because as Chairperson Palesa explained to us earlier, the minister has the final say. And when you put a politician in charge of, with respect to MMC Kunene, when you put a politician in charge of a sensitive process such as this, as opposed to leaving it in the hands of civilians, then you are deemed to have this kind of response that you find now.
Okay.
Nobody is only good or only bad. There's always some good and some bad in everyone. And that is also true for the icon of the struggle, Mama Winnie.
Let me
in
bring
the same way that it's true for William Nicol.
I hear your point. Let me bring in Ernst Roets. Do you see a middle ground here?
Well, I think there can always be a middle ground, and I think on controversial issues such as this, we must be careful not to tend to think of these problems as if it's only black or white, or there's only a 100% yes as opposed to a 100% no. So I think I have to say, listening to some of the earlier speakers, I am a little bit embarrassed. Not for myself, but this talk of, for example, saying that no, there's no point in discussing the impact that this has on the budget because there's a line item on the budget. So therefore, it's sort of irrelevant to talk about how much it costs. Just says to me or conveys to me a complete lack of understanding of basic principles of corporate governance and what it takes to govern a country. If there's an item on the budget, that doesn't mean that you have to spend it. That's basic corporate governance. But other than that, I would say, and I know this might come as a shock to some of the viewers or some of the members on the panel, I would say that it's never acceptable to rename a street after someone like Winnie Mandela. If we were to say, yes, it is, for the sake of the argument, then it's perfectly acceptable to name a street after her, especially in new developments. But the problem that we have in this country is while the population is rapidly growing...
Ernst, did I hear you correctly? Did you say it's never acceptable to name a street after Winnie Mandela? Did I get you correctly?
Yes.
Why?
I can elaborate on that. Well, because of... Well, Winnie Mandela, we all know Winnie Mandela actively and openly in front of video cameras encouraged necklace murders. We know that Winnie Mandela, people who were involved with, we know about the activities, let's say let's start with that, of the Mandela United Football Club. We know about what happened with Stompie Sepe. We know that people who were involved with Winnie Mandela was convicted of murder. And we can reasonably conclude that if it was not for her political connections, she would also have been prosecuted for that murder.
Kenny Kunene,
so yes, I do think...
Kenny Kunene, when you hear Ernst saying that and dragging up the issues of the past, some of it disputed, how do you respond to that?
Winnie Mandela is the mother of the nation. You see, it is people like Heindrich who don't want reconciliation. You can't talk about nation building and you have...
You mean Ernst, right?
Yeah, that gentleman there. And you have names of streets after people who orchestrated millions of murders of black people and colored people and Indian people in this country. You can't. So if you are a true patriot, you will understand the importance of healing the wounds of people like me and millions of others who agree with me. The ANC has been managing our anger because the ANC is a management tool for London and the Nationalist Party that is now masquerading as the Democratic Alliance. So I am very much unapologetic. The colored gentleman who is also trying to be nice is conflicted. I understand why he is trying to be on the middle of this discussion. Number one, would he have rejected the name change or the naming of a municipality on David Kruiper, who is a Khoisan leader, who has fought for the Khoisan people, for them to get 40,000 acres of land? Is he against that? Because then we cannot be selective. I have just indicated a man that is not a politician, S.E.K. Mkai, but who has contributed so much to this country. You've got people that the ANC has neglected, that they have reduced to the dustbin of history, like Tsietsi Mashinini, Dr. Alan Busak, Ashley Krill that I'm wearing today, and Anton French, the people who have played a critical role in the liberation struggle, but they have been reduced to the history, the dustbin history by the African National Congress, and you just see these ones that the ANC wants to name being in the forefront.
Heindrich, let's get your response to what Mr. Kunene said.
Not a patriot. He must go to where he wants the names of Heindrich.
You are being accused of not being a patriot, Heindrich.
Those names are going.
So we rely on you to get the politician to allow us also to participate in the conversation. Can he rightly refer to me as a colored gentleman? I self-identify as colored, as my cultural identity. And if we talk pain, if we talk killings, whatever the words were, populist phrases that he used, one should go back to what former President Thabo Mbeki reminds us of in his I Am an African speech. In that speech, he tells us that the very first people who suffered injustice, who were imprisoned not for crimes but for political reasons, were the Khoisan people. He reminds us that those people and their suffering are forgotten today, even by the democratic government. So this is not just simply a black-white argument.
Yes.
And unfortunately, I think because we're having that discussion in response to the name change that happened last week, obviously that would be the main focus. But we should start at the beginning. There is still a whole lot, unfortunately, of streets named after Jan van Riebeeck. But it's not like the ANC government has ever said we should do more to name more places after the indigenous Khoisan people, the descendants of the slaves. So when Kenny refers to that history, he's obviously doing it as part of his campaign for 2024. I don't blame him. But to accuse me of playing it safe because I'm reminding all of us about a constitution that we've accepted and that the preamble to that constitution that refers to the diverse groups who lives in this country. You can't deny that. Then you have to change the constitution.
Right.
I think if I may just add, Blaine, we will have this conversation, this fight, every time that a name change happened. So what should really happen is for us to decide or to agree on a time frame. Let's use next year, 30 years after our first democratic elections, and say to each other, anyone who wants any street, any building, any river renamed, let's put those names forward. Here's your deadline. Let civil society decide and not politicians ultimately sign off on it.
Heindrich, thank you very much.
Then we can put this matter to bed.
Right. I get your point. Palesa, jump in. You got your hand up.
Yes. Blaine, Ernst Roets of AfriForum reminds me of a certain
Ernest is from Solidarity now. Go ahead.
All right, both, yes. He reminds me of a certain gentleman who wrote to the United Nations in May. I went to the United Nations to present the status quo on standardization of names in South Africa, a country report, the same report that you have. And this particular gentleman wrote to the United Nations and said that white people are under siege in South Africa. The places are named after only black people. Everything is taken away from them. And it is, one forgets the balance. Remember, there's Kgosi Mampuru and Paul Kruger right in the center of Tshwane. Remember, there's a Bram Fisher airport that we all land into when we go to Free State. And people are starting to lead this into a particular narrative which is undesirable. One would say, first of all, that it is still a transformation agenda in South Africa that we need to look after because it's in the Constitution. As much as we have constitutional rights, why are we picking those that we are favorable to? And those that do not suit us, then we refer to them as illegal and unconstitutional. I was at the Mama Winnie Mandela renaming of William Nicol. I attended that session, that event. And one thing about that street naming is that how many other women do we name after? Even in this conversation, I'm looking at how the dominance of the male voice continues to proceed. How many places, how many buildings, even 30 years into our democracy, are towards women and what they have done in this country. Mama Winnie will be one of the few. And we still have a long way. Yet there are people who want to be deemed as detractors of the whole agenda. Yet when some of the elements that they want, they are very happy to proceed.
Let me bring in Ernst, then I'll come to Mr. Kunene. Ernst, why should it be seen as a zero-sum game, whereby something that is gained by one side is lost by the other? Why is it not seen as this adding to historical significance and relevance in a country still healing from the oppression of the past?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And it should not be seen as a zero-sum game. That's the point I made initially. I think we run into difficult territory when we try to present things like place names as something that's either completely correct or completely wrong, because there has to be room for debate and discussion. I'm very much convinced of that. The problem that I have here, and the point that I was trying to make earlier, is that the reason why we are discussing this name or this name change, and the reason why this is controversial, is because no substantial infrastructure development has happened in this country in the last 30 years. And so now there's there's no massive new or substantial new cities that have been built or big new highways that can be named after struggle heroes. And we have to address the elephant in the room, is the spectacular failure of South African government in this country. And now we have what's been happening over the last few decades. We have a government that's failing, as I said, spectacularly, and in the public eye, it's there for everyone to see. And they don't want to talk about their failures. They want to talk about something else than their failures. So then they talk about a government that was in power more than 30 years ago, and they keep blaming a former government for the current failures. And now we have to debate these controversial issues. Actual underlying issue here is that government is failing and that there's no significant new infrastructure that can be named after struggle heroes, and therefore they need to spend all this money to change existing street names that are already well established.
Councillor Kenny Kunene, no significant infrastructure over the past couple of years.
I have not been part of government over the couple of years ago. And I've started being the member of the mayoral committee in February. And where I am, I have done a lot in a short space of time. We are not talking about government infrastructure here. We are talking about renaming of the streets. And since my brother Ernst clarified himself, let me also clarify the point I was making about him being on the line. I understand that he's conflicted. He works for Rapport, which, of course, most of the readers are people like Ernst. So my brother Heindrich works for Rapport. He works for MultiChoice.
What does that have to do with it?
No.
The point.
He works for MultiChoice on a program called The Club. So he is the chairman of Cape Forum, which is funded by the AfriForum. So he has to be a walkie-talkie for them here. I understand that.
You're talking about Heindrich, right?
Heindrich.
Not
Heindrich.
Ernst, yeah. Sorry,
Not Solidarity.
clarify.
Solidarity, I'm coming to him now. So I understand. But
I'll come to you, Heindrich.
My point is,
Heindrich, I'll come to you. Look, we're addressing the issue of name change. Let's get to the point.
He has never had a problem with the name of Heindrich Verwoerd being on our streets all over South Africa, a mass murderer. Now, the gentleman from Solidarity is telling us about no new streets, no new towns are being built. It's not about that. It is about us as the majority of these people whose parents, whose brothers and sisters were murdered by these people that we are honoring on our streets. And we are going to remove all of them. You will see in the next council that the Patriotic Alliance is going to put another name of Louis Botha, and we are coming for Jan Smarts. We are removing them on our streets, and we are putting the names of the people who contributed to this democracy that we have today.
Heindrich,
and we cannot
let me bring
apologetic
you in.
when you are doing the right thing. Even this process of government, of seeking permission after you have been voted into power, to go and seek permission to do the right thing. When we get into power, we will have to change that.
I don't want to forget the bigger issue here in terms of the purpose of renaming streets. With Heindrich, I'm just going to let you respond to Mr. Kunene, and then we move on, right?
Blaine, thank you very much. So, MMC Kunene, but I should call him Deputy President of the Patriotic Alliance, since he's wearing his party colors tonight. He conveniently forgets that he's in coalition with the party who's been governing the country for 3 decades. And if the ANC really wanted, they could have settled this name changes issue a very long time ago. But because they are busy with all kinds of shenanigans and stealing and corruption, they haven't paid much attention to it.
I saw their failure, that's why I'm doing it.
Since our chairperson of the Geographical Names Council mentioned the importance of also celebrating female women icons through name changes, maybe she can also inform us why there's been a delay in the proposed name change for Cape Town International Airport to Krotua, the indigenous icon, as opposed to a name or renaming it after Mam Winnie, which another party with red berets want. Maybe she can tell us, because there is the first woman who has been suffering the kind of suffering that someone like Mam Winnie could also attest to later on. But let's not forget that in no way has Krotua ever been in a serious way remembered or honored by the ANC government.
Let's get Palesa to answer that.
At their own ANC icons.
Let's take it to Palesa. You'll get a quick answer from there, and then we go to a digital audience. Palesa, with regards to the renaming of Cape Town International Airport?
Thank you very much. This is an ongoing process. I don't want to precede and also inform. Remember, we receive submissions from community at large after consultations. I hope that, hey, you've been part of those consultations, because I have not seen your name around any of these discussions. And it worries me today that you are an authority in the matter. The second part is the Western Cape.
That matter has come to a standstill. Nothing is happening.
It hasn't.
It's stalled.
Allow me to proceed.
Go on, Palesa.
Allow me to proceed. The Western Cape, the last name change we've had is the Victor Forster in Paarl, which was submitted after waiting for years into Mandela Drive. After waiting for years for submission, the Western Cape, it is the onus of the people from the Western Cape to pursue this agenda, genuinely so, and be very sincere with the time they take in the submissions. This is a process. The SAGNC does not make any determination except for the people of the place. Eastern Cape submits more than 40 names per year for consideration by the council, and we do change. There's Graf Renate now, which is under discussion to be Robert Sobukwe or Fred Hafka. So those are coming through. But the Western Cape is also, we're waiting for that to come through. It is not being processed. Please make sure that you process that as an interested party and an advocate.
All right,
we
Palesa.
have not, yes.
Let's I want to bring in
name changes
Heindrich.
in the Eastern Cape.
Let's park that there.
Deterioration in the Eastern Cape and all
Heindrich, let's park it there.
Name changes.
I want to bring in Glenda. Glenda, let's hear your take with regards to, in a South African context where these racial divisions still prevail. How best can the renaming process be handled?
Yes, thank you so much, Blaine. So the thing is with naming things or words and language in general is it's a very effective but invisible way to continue legacies and colonial hegemony, right? So by these places still bearing names of colonialists, it immortalizes their legacy. So by renaming things, it's part of a decolonial process. However, we are at risk of this process becoming performative if it just ends there. So we're just renaming things. That cannot be step one alone. It needs to continue. Right? We need to reconscientize the population, especially young people, to understand the reverence and the effectiveness of renaming these places. Because we need to look especially at the way history is being written and the way that history is being described using language. Because what good is it to rename a place Ruth First if nobody knows who that is, right? So in South Africa, redefining their identity, we need to go beyond just renaming things, but looking at how we are naming things in the schooling system and how we are preparing people to understand the history that they're met with every day with the names of streets and buildings.
Important. Facts are nothing without context. Thank you, Glenda. Andre, to you.
Yes, I just find it interesting that MMC Kunene and Ms. Kadi are so fiercely advocating for renaming street names like William Nicol to Winnie Mandela, when William Nicol is a far better role model than Winnie Mandela. He was instrumental in translating the Bible into Zulu. While Winnie Mandela, that you so graciously call the mother of the nation, I prefer what the Sowetan called her in 1993 the mugger of the nation, was associated with the murder of 15 people, including the 14-year-old Stompie Sapai. So renaming it in her honor from a man that was instrumental in translating the Bible into Zulu is interesting. When nearly 80% of South Africans are Christian. So.
Well, let's get your take on what is being said and the pushback tackling Winnie Mandela's legacy. A lot of these things weren't proven, by the way. How do you see that playing out now? Why is it so divisive?
You see, these are the people who hated Mam Winnie because of her contribution to the liberation struggle. She remained revolutionary and radical till the end. And what I'm happy about and what I was excited about on the 26th of September on her birthday when we unveiled Winnie Mandela Drive, is that Andre and Ernst will be able to now spell the name of Winnie Mandela properly when they send WhatsApp messages to give directions to people to their offices. They will be able to say her name because we have now put her in the middle of Sandton, in the busiest street in Sandton. So it will remind them of her contribution. These claims of what they are talking about, both of them, shows that they are not patriotic. They don't put this country first. They don't take the reconciliation seriously. And that is why, and this is what motivates me to say that as a politician, as Heindrich has been labeling me, by the way, I'm not doing this for elections. The name of Winnie Mandela change was brought to my office in July. I was told that council made a resolution in 2018. I said, why wait for so long? Nobody wanted to sign it off. I then put together the officials. I said I want this thing done in September. First week of August, the meeting happened, and I said I want to unveil in September. And we achieved that. So it's not about politics. Right. It is about me implementing in my capacity as the MMC of transport. Because any name change has to land on my table right. for implementation. Right. I'm going to do that with many others. But I'm happy that William Nicol is named Winnie Mandela Drive. William Nicol selfishly translated the Bible to Zulu so that they can be able to try and indoctrinate the Zulus for them to understand what they wanted to understand, because he oversaw a process of implementing apartheid. How can you compare that to Winnie Mandela?
All right, let's take it to our digital audience. Pindulo, let's hear from you. What do you make of the debate? If you can unmute, go ahead.
I would like to ask a question to Ernst about what he said when he said that it is not acceptable for changing names. So my question for him is it acceptable if we can change the names of the graveyards of those people who were killed by the apartheid governments into the names of those officials who were responsible for those matters? Is this what has to be done? Because of when we change the names of the streets that are causing trauma to the individuals of the South Africa who work on those streets each and every day, remembering whatever that was happening during the apartheid era, it does not look well to the minority. So my question is, do we have to put the names of the apartheid officials to the graveyard so that the apartheid government can remember what they did to the people of South Africa? Or they should let us, the South Africans, to put the names of those who fought for us in this country and fought for the right and the freedom of the individuals of South Africa to the streets? And to answer what the ANC has just said, that he does not feel well when you travel through those streets, remembering himself a van of the police.
All right. Pindoli, your line is breaking up, but I get your point. I want to take it to Ernst. Ernst, that question was directed to you.
Yeah, well, I think it could be acceptable, but the underlying issue here is about consistency. So let's just to link this question to what Kenny said earlier is, you know, when those in power, the government or the ANC, speaks about the Broederbond, there's only really two things that they say. The one is that it's immoral because it was a race-based organization that worked to the benefit of one particular racial group. It's immoral. It should be rejected. And the other thing they say about the Broederbond is we need a black Broederbond. So you need to be consistent in what you say about the past. So if we say, for example, the argument is that names can't be, we cannot have offensive names. We cannot have names of streets in which people drive who are reminded about the pain that was caused to them. Why then was the main street of Amanzimtoti renamed from Kingsway to Andrew Zondo Street? Andrew Zondo only did one thing that we know of that is significant in his life, and that is he planted a bomb in a restaurant, in a shopping center, and he killed a bunch of innocent women and children. That's what he did. There are people in Amanzimtoti who drive to work in a street that was named after the person that killed their family members. And now we can also say, is it acceptable for the family of Stompie Sepe to drive around on a street named after Winnie Mandela? So that argument goes both ways. We can have that argument, and that's a very good argument, but then we have to apply it consistently. But at the end of the day, it seems that it's not really about that argument. It's not really for those in power, for the ANC and those who are doing these street name changes. For them, it's not really about not having people driving to work or seeing street names that remind them of the pain that was caused to them. Because if it was really about that to them, they would not have changed street names to people who were convicted of having murdered innocent people.
Councillor, how do you respond to that?
What Andrew did was in response to the murders that the apartheid government was giving to our people. Our people were killed en masse. And as part of the liberation struggle. And as part of the armed struggle, those who went to exile had to come back, and they had to respond fire by fire, because we did not have the same ammunition that the apartheid government had. But I want to say that as we rename the streets, we need to change our curricula, because even our education system does not speak to making young people, whether black, white, Indian or colored, to be proud of being a South African. Our history is so distorted so that it makes a white person superior to our people. That is why even in government you have got SMMEs, but when a young person who is white starts a company, it's called a company, not an SMME. So we need to also transform. So this renaming of the streets will form part of the education of our young people about their history and who contributed to what we have today.
It's something that Glenda raised.
And I commit to South Africans, Kunene, that I am going to spearhead name changing first in the city of Johannesburg, and when we get in national parliament, I am going to spearhead it at national government. Kruger National Park must be changed. Paul Kruger's name must go. There is a Vervoort Park here in Alberton. It must go. There is a tunnel, a beautiful tunnel in Limpopo named Heindrich Vervoort. It is wrong. It is insulting to our people. It must be changed.
I got your point. Heindrich, I'm going to come to you in a short while. I need to take some audio messages. We've asked you, our viewers, to send us your messages with regards to tonight's debate. This is what you had to say. Take a listen.
The only problem that I see is consultation. If you don't consult the right people, because like for example, William Nicol, there's people who are still proud of the name William Nicol. And if you don't consult them and say, no, we are going to do it like this, then at the end of the day, it will be dividing us as nation.
It honors nation building. Only nation building. This is Robert Griffin here. Thank you.
Yes, it is very significant in order to rectify apartheid injustice so that we can be equal in our society.
Naming of streets and the landmarks fosters nation building.
All right, we'll appreciate your comments on tonight's topic. Very briefly to you, Heindrich, you wanted to pick up on a point?
Yes, thank you, Blaine. So I have the feeling that before you change the curriculum, you have to ensure that children have placement in schools, have school books, have school classrooms to attend. And I'm not sure that renaming a street, please, I'm not referring to any particular one. Renaming a street is not going to be of any comfort to a hungry person or a jobless person walking down that street. So maybe Kunene must first talk to his friends in the ANC to ensure that service delivery improves in those provinces, particularly in the Eastern Cape, where they cover. Otherwise, you can do some symbolic changes, but it's not changing the conditions of poor people in this country.
Got your point, Heindrich. Thank you very much indeed. SG, let's hear from you.
Thank you so much. I think the discussion really is very often to a lot of different branches, but I just want to dispel the notion that in the past 30 years that we've had democracy, there was supposed to be these big, significant changes. Transformation is not a popcorn arrangement. That's the first thing that you need to understand. There are structures in place that currently ensure that there are certain people that remain as the economic hegemons of this country. So if we're going to be discussing those such transformative questions and points, we need to start at the fact that someone like Ernst is in no position to talk about how there's been 30 years in order to do all these things, whereas there's been 400 years to oppress our people. It's very incorrect, and it's very. I'm not sure of the word that I can use to describe how it sounds from that particular perspective.
Okay.
And I agree with what Glenda has said in the sense that once we sort of keep these names there, I agree with the name change. That's the first thing. Once we decide to keep names like Willem Nicol, we're deciding, contrary to what Andre has said, my esteemed colleague here, to overlook the fact that William Nicol was in fact responsible to administer the same system that we are saying has oppressed our people. It's history, it is there. We cannot now say, oh, we're going to honor these people because they translated the Bible. For what end? To what end did they translate the Bible? For what reason?
Thank you,
So
thank you very much. And we'll have to leave it there. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but we would love to talk to the rest of our guests as well. But unfortunately, time is not on our side. To my guests, thank you so much. Ernst, Heindrich, Mr. Kunene, thank you very much indeed for your time. This discussion will carry on, no doubt. And we would love to have you guys back onto the program in a different format as well. Thank you very much indeed. All right, before we go, here's my take question. What's in a name that which we call a rose by any other name would smell just as sweet, given Shakespeare didn't have to deal with the heavy political and social stresses we do in this day and age. But does the old bard have a point? I hear what you're saying. Some of you are saying that instead of spending money on renaming streets, spend money on finding ways to keep the traffic lights on those streets. Some say it's just a waste of money. But is it? The word waste is subjective, based on or influenced by personal feelings or opinions. There are others who see it as a step in the right direction, honoring those who have contributed and have a legacy or memory that we can live by, a reflection of identity and heritage. Look, the intersection of everybody is satisfied and you can't please everybody is a busy one, right? The traffic lights never go off on that intersection, but perhaps renaming in exceptional circumstances, in the interest of national reconciliation and the healing of a nation should be considered, but only with true transformation at heart, and if we can afford it. And that's my take. If you miss anything, to be sure to watch this episode of It's Topical on YouTube. Sports Live up next as we build up to the Box game. If you're watching a repeat of this program, then as always, the news continues. Until next week, my brothers and sisters, take care. Bye-bye. Thank you so much.